All right, good morning. This meeting is called to order. Mr. Strowman, has anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Strowman. All right, good morning. No cases to
morning.
reconsider under agenda item 3.
That's correct.
All right, no under agenda item 4 on tax liability cases. No cases on docket 28. No fair housing cases, no child labor cases. Under agenda item 7, we have one wage claim case on docket 28 pulled for additional discussion.
Yes, sir. We have one full case for wage claim. Case number 230534977, Commissioner Sparse.
We want to go with the AT decision. The AT decision is supportable. I agree that the claimant's appeal from the initial determination was timely due to delayed receipt. On the issue of vacation pay, the appeal tribunal correctly ruled that because the employer's policy did not clearly state that all available vacation leave will be paid out to a departing employee at the time of work separation, the claimant is not entitled to be paid for all 20 days that would have been available for her to use during the year if she had remained employed. She would be entitled to the vacation leave accrued up to through her date of work separation, but not to any amount beyond that. Accordingly, we should affirm the AT decision. The claimant filed a timely appeal. No additional wages are due.
The decision should be modified. I agree that the claimant's appeal to the preliminary wage determination order should be deemed timely. However, the evidence provided by the claimant, including the employer's written vacation policy, the claimant's offer letter, and the evidence of the vacation payout made to another employee, established that under the employer's policies, all allotted vacation hours for the year accrued after the claimant completed her 90-day probationary period. Therefore, the claimant had accrued 160 hours of vacation at the separation of and is entitled to $9,089.35 in vacation pay. The difference between the pay owed to the claimant and the amount already paid by the employer. Modify the WCAT timely claimant appeal, $9,089.35 wages owed.
Timely claimant appeal, $9,089.35 wages owed.
Short form dissent.
Yes, sir. That was the only full wage claim case for docket 28, and you should have received the short form dissent list for docket 28.
I move we accept staff recommendations on the remaining wage claim cases on docket 28.
I second the motion, except for those cases which I am dissenting as reflected on wage claim short form dissent list for docket 28.
I concur with the chairman's motion, except for the cases in which I'm dissenting is reflected in the wage claim short form dissent list for docket 28.
Motion passes with the exceptions noted. Let's move to agenda item 8. Consideration of unemployment insurance cases on docket 28. Please proceed when you're ready.
Case number 3111418, Commissioner Esparza.
The AT decision is not supportable based on available information. Although the employer's Rule 16 request and initial appeal were late, the hearing notice and chargeback determination may have been sent to an invalid address. The employer was given credible and consistent statements that its accountant filed a change of address request with TWC sometime at the very start of the pandemic in March of 2020, and that the company has not received the claim notice and determinations. In an essentially identical case on docket 49 in 2023, appeal number 3111786, the commission majority accepted the employer's testimony of non-receipt. Accordingly, we should hold a rehearing to give the employer an opportunity to submit a copy of the change of address form from 2020 and explain how it was submitted to TWC back in March of 2020.
The AT decision should be affirmed. The AT1 decision was mailed to the employer's correct address of record, but the employer failed to properly monitor its mail while the employer was out of town due to personal matters. The employer also acknowledged that they do not regularly check their mail. The employer could not remember whether they received the AT1 decision and therefore did not provide sufficient evidence to rebut the presumption of receipt. Since there is no good cause exception to the timeliness rules, the employer's petition to reopen should be dismissed as late. Affirm the AT late employer petition to reopen, late employer appeal, late response to notice of maximum potential chargeback.
Rehear.
We will rehear the case.
Case number 3111956, Commissioner Esparza.
Just as in the companion case, the AT decision is not supportable based on the information available. Although the employer's Rule 16 requests the initial appeal were late, the hearing notice and chargeback determination may have been sent to an invalid address. The employer has given credible and consistent statements that its accountant filed a change of address request with the Texas Workforce Commission sometime at the very start of the pandemic in March of 2020, and that the company has not received the claim notice and determinations. In an essentially identical case on docket 49 in 2023, appeal number 3111786, the commission majority accepted the employer's testimony of non-receipt. Accordingly, we should hold a rehearing to give the employer an opportunity to submit a copy of his change of address in 2020 and explain how it submitted the TWC back in March 2022. Excuse me, March of 2020.
The AT decision should be affirmed. The AT1 decision was mailed to the employer's correct address of record, but the employer did not remember whether they received the AT1 decision and therefore did not provide sufficient evidence to rebut the presumption of receipt. Since there is no good cause exception to the timeliness rules, the employer's petition to reopen should be dismissed as late. Affirm the AT, late employer petition to reopen, late employer appeal, late response to notice of maximum potential chargeback.
Rehear.
We will rehear the case.
Case number 3601237, Commissioner Esparza.
The AT decision should be modified. First, I agree that the employer established good cause for missing the AT hearing. Concerning the timeliness of the employer's protest, the employer gave credible testimony that they experienced mail delivery issues and received the claim notice after a deadline for a timely protest. Since the employer's testimony specified that the late protest arose from late receipt of the notice of claim, the employer's protest should be deemed timely and the case should be resubmitted for merits testimony. In the alternative, Commission should conduct a timeliness rehearing to question the employer's chief administration officer, who was unavailable for the AT2 hearing, about the circumstances surrounding the delayed receipt. Rehear.
The decision should be affirmed. I won't contest that the employer had good cause for missing AT1. Regarding the timeliness of the employer's protest, the notice of initial claim was mailed to the employers at the address where the claimant last worked and was received by the employer at that address. The employer's evidence shows that it filed its protest to the notice of the initial claim on 5/31 of 23, 7 days after the appeal date deadline of 5/24 of 23. The employer failed to provide sufficient evidence to rebut the presumption of receipt. And since there is no good cause exception to the timeliness rules, the AT decision deemed that the employer's response was late and should be affirmed. Affirm the AT, employer established good cause for AT1, late employer protest.
Employer established good cause for AT, timely employer protest resubmit.
We will resubmit the case.
Case number 3608791, Commissioner Esparza.
The AT decision should be modified. I don't dispute the validity of the claim ruling issue. As to the job separation, the employer witness testified that she saw a video of the final incident which depicted the claimant walking towards children with his fist closed. The employer stated that the claimant's action created the belief that the claimant was going to commit an assault against children had the employer staff not stepped in. As the only party to attend the appeal hearing, the employer's sworn testimony should be given greater weight. Therefore, the claimant's action constituted mismanagement of his position of employment and misconduct connected with the work. We should modify the AT valid claim misconduct, reimbursing employer not billed, adequate employer response.
The AT decision should be affirmed. The employer provided no firsthand testimony regarding the final incident, while the claimant has consistently denied the allegations of misconduct. The written statement submitted by the employer corroborates the claimant's statements to the claims examiner that the child was the aggressor towards the claimant. threw punches at him, and called him a racial slur. As such, the employer failed to meet the burden of proof to establish that the claimant engaged in actions that could be considered misconduct connected with the work. Affirm the AT, no misconduct, bill reimbursing employer.
Valid claim, no misconduct, bill reimbursing employer.
Short form dissent.
Yes, sir.
Case number 3612842, Commissioner Trevino.
The AT decision is correct. The claimant was told that her position was being eliminated, and she was paid through the 2-week notice period. During the notice period, the employer offered the claimant other positions with substantially different duties than her previous role. The claimant's decision not to accept the new job offers in a vastly different role did not change the nature of the job separation. Additionally, when the claimant informed others about the elimination of her role, she was unaware that this was information her employer did not wish to disclose. Therefore, the claimant was discharged for reasons other than misconduct connected with the work. Affirm the AT, no misconduct, bill reimbursing employer.
We should reverse the AT decision. Although the employer attempted to accommodate the claimant by offering continued work, the claimant declined to accept the employer's offer based on an unsubstantiated belief that she was unfit for the job. Since the evidence did not establish that the claimant's working conditions would have been substantially different, the claimant's failure to accept further work constituted a voluntary separation without work-connected good cause. As such, we should reverse the AT decision, voluntary leaving, reimbursing employer not billed, adequate employer response.
Voluntary leaving, reimbursing employer not billed, adequate employer response.
A short form dissent, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Case number 3623004, Commissioner Trevino.
The AT decision is not supportable. The claimant resigned due to significant medical issues. The claimant was previously hospitalized in February and March of the same year for the same health issues before returning to work. These issues impacted the claimant's ability to perform her job, and she had previously provided medical documentation to her employer regarding these health issues. Therefore, the claimant established that her decision to leave the job was directly related to her medically verified illness and established good cause connected with the work for quitting. Reverse the AT, no voluntary leaving.
The AT decision should be affirmed. The claimant quit her job due to medical reasons. However, the claimant testified that she was not under a doctor's care when she resigned and that no doctor had advised her to resign. The claimant also stated that continued work was available at the time she quit. Because continued work was available and because the doctor had not advised the claimant to resign at the time that she did, the claimant quit without work-connected good cause. We should therefore affirm the AT decision, voluntary leaving.
Voluntary leaving.
Short form dissent, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Case number 3632874, Commissioner Trevino.
The claimant's continued claim involved his work for a gig economy employer in self-employment. As such, there is no separation from employment, and the continued claim that was dated June 24th of 2023 should be voided. Void the continued claim, set aside the AT decision, and set aside the job separation and overpayment determinations.
We should affirm the AT decision. The claimant stopped working due to personal reasons, thus he quit without work-connected good cause. Ask to affirm the AT decision, voluntary leaving and overpayment.
Set aside the AT, void the continued claim, void the overpayment.
Short form dissent.
Yes, sir. That was the last case pulled for docket 28, and you should have received the short form dissent list for docket 28.
Move to accept staff recommendations on the remaining UI cases on docket 28.
I second the motion except for those cases on which I am dissenting, as reflected on the UI short form dissent list for docket 28.
I concur with the chairman's motion except for the cases on which I am dissenting as reflected in the UI short form dissent list for docket 28.
Motion passes with the exceptions noted. Thank you. This brings us to the end of agenda items 1 through 8. We'll take a short recess.
Where are we? Okay.
All right. Here we are with agenda item 9, adoption of rule amendments to 40 Tech Chapter 809, Child Care Services.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Reagan Miller with the Child Care and Early Learning Division. Before you are the final rule amendments to Chapter 9, Child Care Services. On April 30th, you approved publishing proposed amendments to the child care rules for public comment. Those proposed changes were informed by significant stakeholder input during local provider focus groups, a statewide Texas Rising Star work group, regional in-person meetings, as well as statewide virtual stakeholder meetings. We also did digital outreach. We did receive a handful of comments to the proposed rule amendments during the formal public comment period. These comments reiterate issues that were raised through early stakeholder engagement and were already considered by the Texas Rising Star Work Group and TWC staff. Therefore, the final rule does not include any changes to the proposed rules that were approved for publication in April. Staff recommends adoption of the final rule. We also request the ability to make minor non-substantive changes to the document to comply with the publication requirements of the Texas Register and the Office of the Secretary of State. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions?
None here.
No question, Chairman.
Is there a motion today?
Chairman, I move we approve the adoption of amendments to 40 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 809, Child Care Services as recommended today by staff.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. The motion carries. So agenda item 10, revisions to the Texas Rising Star Guidelines.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to the rule changes, we have changes to the Texas Rising Star Guidelines, which were also based on that stakeholder input that I mentioned for the prior agenda item. These changes align with the final rule amendments that you just approved. As with the changes to the child care rules, you approved publishing the draft of the Texas Rising Star Guidelines for public comment on April 30th. We received a few comments from entities in response to these guidelines outlined in the discussion paper. Several of the issues raised were already addressed and discussed by the Texas Rising Star Work Group's review. And commenters also supported many of the changes that are already in the draft guidelines. Therefore, the final guidelines do not include any changes in response to the comments received. We do recommend approval of the final Texas Rising Star Guidelines, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Is there a motion?
Chairman, I move we approve the revisions to the Texas Rising Star Guidelines as described in the discussion paper and recommended today by staff.
Second.
It's been moved second, motion carries. This agenda item 11, which has been postponed to a future meeting. Agenda item 12, proposed new rules in 40 Tech Chapter 844 prohibited coronavirus vaccine mandates by private employer.
Good morning, Chair Daniel, Commissioner Trevino, Commissioner Esparza, Mr. Cerna. For the record, my name is Chuck Ross. I'm the Director of TWC's Division of Fraud Deterrence and Compliance Monitoring. For your consideration today, staff is bringing forward proposed rule amendments to new Chapter 844 prohibited coronavirus vaccine mandates by private employers. During its third called session, the 88th Texas Legislature enacted and the governor signed Senate Bill 7, which amended the Texas Health and Safety Code by adding Chapter 881D. This chapter of the code prohibits private non-governmental employers from taking an adverse action against their employees, contractors, applicants for employment, or applicants for a contract position for refusal to be vaccinated against COVID-19 as a condition of employment or contract position. The chapter provides for an exception in the case of certain healthcare providers, facilities, and physicians. These employers may establish reasonable policies, including the required use of protective medical equipment for employees or contractors not vaccinated against COVID-19. An employee, contractor, or prospective employee or contractor who feels aggrieved by an adverse action taken by the employer for failure to vaccinate against COVID-19 may file a complaint with TWC in a manner prescribed by the Commission's rules. The agency must investigate the complaint. If the complaint involves a healthcare employer, agency staff must coordinate with the Texas Department of State Health Services. If the agency finds that an adverse action was imposed, it must assess an administrative penalty of $50,000 against the employer. The employer may avoid the penalty if it hires the applicant for employment or offers a contract to the prospective contractor, or if it rehires the former employee or contractor with back pay and makes every reasonable effort to reverse the effects of the adverse action. If the agency finds that a violation occurred, it may recover from the employer reasonable investigative costs incurred by the agency in conducting its investigation, regardless of whether the employer takes mitigating actions to make the complainant whole. Finally, the commissioners are required to adopt rules necessary to implement and enforce the new chapter. The proposed rules before you this morning do the following. Subchapter A clarifies and interprets terms and definitions necessary to implement the new law, including the definition of agency, complainant, contractor, employee, employer, governmental entity, and person. Subchapter B clarifies and interprets the complaints provision of Senate Bill 7, including the criteria and elements to be included on the complaint form, what constitutes a valid complaint, the agency's jurisdiction to consider and investigate a complaint, circumstances under which a complaint may be dismissed, the criteria and elements in determining an adverse action, and coordination with the Department of State Health Services. Subchapter C interprets the investigative provisions of Senate Bill 7 by describing the preliminary determination order and, as applicable, determinations on remedial action and orders of costs incurred by the agency related to its investigation. Subchapter C also provides for corrected determinations and decisions and withdrawal of a complaint by the complainant. Finally, Subchapter C describes what determinations are appealable and the timelines for any appeals. Lastly, Subchapter D describes the processes and procedures for administrative hearings when the agency's determination is appealed by the employer. Finally, the subchapter provides for judicial review if the employer remains aggrieved following an appeal. This morning, staff is seeking your approval to post these proposed rules for a 30-day public comment period in the Texas Register. Additionally, staff is seeking approval to make non-substantive changes to facilitate their publication in the Register. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Comments or questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Before we move to a motion, Commissioners, I wanted to tell you, I'll be voting no on the rule package today as currently written. I think that the legislation that was implemented in the statutes that we operate under provide us the authority to adopt rules to manage the program with the appropriate oversight. But I don't think that a rule package that abdicates our responsibility to review appeals in this program is good government. We can take a vote on the rules as presented. I would offer this alternative for us to consider. I would like to send it back to staff and ask them to restructure the rules so that a review by the three commissioners of any unfavorable decision in the case could happen. We would give that back to staff, ask them to bring that back to us as soon as they possibly could. If there's no objection to sending it back and asking him to add a review by the three commissioners at the end of the process, we could just do that today and leave this as an open issue. If there's an objection to that, then we'll need to take a motion. I can try to get an amendment to that motion and we can move forward. So it would be your preference here.
Yeah, I guess, if I'm understanding you correct, I'll just agree that we can wait for staff to come back, and I'll forego this motion at this time.
Okay.
I'll support that.
All right, Mr. Cerna, my issue is that the three commissioners are not the final decision on an appeal within the agency before judicial review. I'd like to send that back to staff and have that addressed.
Yes, sir.
Next available commission, I'm not going to assign a time frame to you because I want you guys to do your best work, and let us continue this discussion at that time. Commissioners, anything to add?
No, none here.
No, sir.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is agenda item 13, proposed rule reviews.
Good morning, Chairman Daniel, Commissioner Trevino, Commissioner Esparza, and Mr. Cerna. For the record, I'm Reed O'Brien with the Office of General Counsel. Texas Government Code, Chapter 2001, Section 0.039 requires state agencies to review their rules every 4 years to consider each rule for readoption, revision, or repeal, and to determine whether the reasons for initially adopting the rules continue to exist. Commissioners, before you today for your consideration and approval are notices of TWC's intention to review its rules in the following five chapters of the Texas Administrative Code. Chapter 823, Integrated Complaints, Hearings, and Appeals. Chapter 837, Apprenticeship Training Program. Chapter 840, WIOA Eligible Training Providers. Chapter 842, WIOA Non-Discrimination and Equal Opportunity. And Chapter 858, Procurement and Contract Management Requirements for Purchase of Goods and Services for Vocational Rehabilitation Services. TWC staff's assessment of those rules will include determining whether the rules are obsolete, whether they reflect current legal and policy considerations, and whether they reflect the Commission's current procedures. Staff recommends submitting the notices of intention to review the rules for publication in the Texas Register for a 30-day public comment period. And after the comment period ends, staff will present the results of the rule review assessments for the Commission's consideration. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Comments or questions?
Nothing here.
Not for me, Chair.
Is there a motion?
Chairman, I move that we approve the proposed rule reviews for the following chapters of Title 40, Texas Administrative Code for public comment as recommended today by staff. Chapter 823, Integrated Complaints, Hearings, and Appeals. Chapter 837, Apprenticeship Training Program. Chapter 840, WIOA Eligible Training Providers. Chapter 842, WIOA Non-Discrimination and Equal Opportunity. And Chapter 858, Procurement and Contract Management Requirements for Purchase of Goods and Services for Vocational Rehabilitation Services.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Motion carries. Thank you. It's agenda item 14, statewide program to transition from military to civilian employment.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Cerna. For the record, my name is Dawn Cronin, and my notes have just blanked themselves. All right, for your consideration this morning is a discussion paper in your briefing or in your notebooks there, the statewide program to transition military to civilian employment. At the June 19th commission meeting, staff were asked to bring a proposal to create a statewide application-based program to assist active duty transitioning military personnel and their spouses as they depart military service and transition to civilian employment. Additionally, staff were asked to work with other state occupational licensing agencies to review licensing requirements for military credentials to transition to credentials recognized by civilian employers. Staff recommends creating a statewide application-based program funded with $3 million in WIOA statewide funds to provide employment services, training, and wraparound support services to assist transitioning service members, recently separated veterans, and military spouses transitioning to civilian employment. Staff also recommends convening a work group of occupational licensing and regulatory agencies to identify barriers and possible solutions in removing the barriers to transitioning service members, recently separated veterans, and military spouses to facilitate obtaining occupational licenses for civilian employment. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any comments or questions?
No comments or questions.
Don and Bob, I'd like to thank you both for working on this and helping to answer it. And Chairman, I really appreciate your insight on helping to better the initial proposal. And I think from this perspective, this is an application that's based upon all boards that have military installations that could use this. Hopefully this will impact them in some way. Again, as a veteran, I was trained to do a lot of different things. One of which is as a diesel mechanic. I'm not saying I've left the military I can tear apart an engine, but I can't put it back together. But it didn't start me off at a base level of not knowing, what from what. So the credential part of it was a great. Also, I really appreciate the credential transitioning those credentials into something that can give service members a little bit of a boost in basically not starting at the base level. So commissioners, I appreciate the work and consideration that y'all put into this as well. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Bob. Thank you very much for working on this. I think we're going to help a lot of people. The other thing I would say, in addition to Commissioner Sparsa's comments, are make sure the boards keep good records on this. I anticipate that we will have a very good story to tell, but more importantly, if this works as well as I think this is going to work, we're going to want to replicate this inside the system. All right. And if it needs more money, it needs more money. If it needs less money, it needs less money. I'm not really as concerned about the funding levels, but I think we have some discretion there. What I'm interested in is, let's figure out what really works and what doesn't work. This is for a lot of folks that really, frankly, have earned quite a bit more help. And I think you got a great proposal here. I hope it works in practice as well as it seems like it's going to work on paper. Joe, thanks for bringing this forward. I think these are two good issues. I think we're in real good hands here. And can you meet me in the parking garage after this? I was going to take a look at something real quick.
Absolutely.
Is there a motion?
He can tear it apart. He can't put it back
Yeah,
together.
you and I are going to put it back together, but we're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Chairman, I move that we approve the creation of the transition from military to civilian employment statewide program, utilizing $3 million in WIOA statewide funds, and the creation of a working group of occupational licensing and regulatory agencies to address barriers in the transition from military to civilian employment, as described in the discussion paper and presented today by staff.
I'm proud of second.
Yeah, it's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sparza, we do have some training programs that will help you put that engine back together.
They are good. I saw a video one time talking about it. Agenda item 15, board nominations.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners, and Mr. Shine. For the record, Cherie Dudley with Workforce Development. Today, for your consideration, we have Workforce Board nominations for Boardaplex, Brazos Valley, Capital Area, South Texas, Northeast Texas, Central Texas, Panhandle, Permian Basin, Rural Capital Area, and Southeast Texas. Staff recommends approval on the presented nominees, and I'm here to answer questions you may have.
Any comments or questions?
None here.
No
Is
questions.
there a motion?
Chairman, I move we approve the local workforce development board member nominees presented today for the following: Workforce Solutions Borderplex, Brazos Valley, Capital Area, South Texas, Northeast Texas, Central Texas, Panhandle, Permian Basin, Rural Capital Area, and Southeast Texas.
A second.
It's been moved second. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there an executive director's report today?
No, sir, not today.
Is there any other order of business come before the commission? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Chairman, I move to adjourn.
A second.
Been moved second to adjourn. We're adjourned.